Hey everybody, welcome back to our free TV. It is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. I'm so glad to be back with you here on the channel on You Are Free TV. I'll jump right in with my disclaimer. This video is for entertainment purposes only. It is protected by the United States Constitution protecting free speech, as well as the Sullivan Act and reporting. It is not intended to bully or harass anyone, never to incite violence, hatred, or lawlessness of any kind. It doesn't give legal, medical, or financial advice, and there are further disclaimers in the description below. So I'm so glad to be back with you. I always start by saying thank you so much to everybody supporting monthly. You make it happen, and I'm so thankful for everything that you do, including your news tips, your prayers, your great comments. They're always just reach my heart, and I'm so thankful. So we're going to jump into the news here. I hope a lot of you watching this were able to watch the video I put up yesterday, the great interview with Mike McKibben, where we brought up the story of Lillian Troy Scott and her attempts and one of the only people to try to expose the Pilgrim Society early on, way back, dating back to like 1909, when the Pilgrim Society was launching itself as sort of an early World Economic Forum style situation with the technology they had available at the time, which was basically taking over the news corporations of the world to put out this pro-British narrative, and especially elevate the royals and all of that kind of society to basically use the robber barons of the Carnegies and the Morgans and all of them, all led by the Rothschild bankster elite, to basically to entice America back into this pro-Britain narrative, of course, after our revolution away from them. And this is what's going on now on large scale with what's happening with Trump in the actions against Iran as the proxy puppet state of the City of London and their control of energy through the Rothschilds, but all of the bankster empires, all the ones that are immune to basically have any investigations into them through the 1939 International Organizations Immunity Act that is still in place to this day. That has been going on forever, but we'll get into that. But what's really important here is I wanted, before I jump into things like Joe Kent and what's going on with Iran and all of this, that we kind of just, what wasn't covered yesterday, and I meant to get to it with Mike McKibben, was the part of the plan, and what was exposed there by Lillian Troy Scott was she received basically the documentation about how the Pilgrim Society, the most elite of the billionaire class at the time, their minions were basically had a 24-point plan of what is the Pilgrim Society. This is Cecil Rhodes and all of them who wanted to annex America, take it back, stop the revolution, and it was basically to be done by the banks, by the big banks, and to take ownership of America through corporatists and what was, of course, at the time, the robber barons of the Carnegies, etc., Rockefeller, etc. And we've seen through the recent Epstein files of how Rockefeller brought in Epstein to be on the trilateral commission, literally at the head of the head. He is the head on top of Mossad, not controlled by Mossad, but actually Mossad does Epstein's bidding as the role of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, etc. And so I wanted to just bring what some of these points were from what was exposed in 1909 by the amazing Lillian Scott Troy, of the journalist out of San Francisco who exposed them. And please see my video from yesterday. Mike McKibben's written a great book about her, and it's very fantastic. You can go to lillianscotttroy.com and purchase that book. But basically, it was all about using the cabal using puppets. Okay, this is Cartel Babylon, as I talk about so often, using the puppets of the world that had the money to do their bidding. And this had to do with banking strangleholds on the American economy. This is what Trump is fighting right now with this Iran operation, whatever you want to call it, fighting this. And we see the tests that have come out that he's put on with NATO, etc., to show them to the world that they are not pro-America, they're not pro-NATO, they're just very angry that they don't get our treasure anymore. And so it was hugely banking strongholds. That's when we got, of course, the Federal Reserve, when we got the business, the Bank of International Settlements after World War II. All of this taking hold to rob and steal everything from America. The seizure of the courts. So this is the 24-point blueprint. I'm only going to discuss a few of them, but the seizure of the courts, which is now massively in place in the USA, of course, funded massively by the Soros, the Soros empire, etc., and many more besides. Espionage, right? This is the creation of CIA and MI6. MI6 was created literally at the time of the Pilgrim Society to create this espionage class within the British government, but basically beholden to the banksters. And the CIA then came after the OSS. And what happened after World War II? Espionage, okay, biowarfare. We're seeing that hugely. And I think it was Milei just came out today out of Argentina and declared that Argentina has now removed itself from the World Health Organization. So that's great on the biowarfare front. But we're all sitting here in this pollution of massive chemtrails. You have this huge, massive heat wave on the West Coast. You have a huge, massive freeze out on the East Coast, and in between tornadoes and blizzards. I'm just completely fake weather. And this weather control mechanism owned by the elites, owned by a supranational cabal that is using it for their bidding, is something we obviously are continuing to try to take on. But and then of course surveillance. This is 1909 when she exposed this. Surveillance was massive, right? This is the kickoff of propaganda, controlling the media, and of course surveillance, which became now we're looking at as the massive infrastructure of surveillance infrastructure. I think FISA, they're pushing it really hard. It's kind of secondary to what's going on in the Senate right now, where we have them up on the floor talking about pass the Save America Act. Oh, yay. 202-224-3121 if you want to call your senator and tell them to get it done. 202-224-2321 for Thune directly as the leader there of the Senate. But basically what we're looking at with FISA is it's going under the radar, that they are planning to just repass FISA as is, with full surveillance control, and it's going very unnoticed as it is expiring. You have people like Lauren Boebert, Ogles coming out and saying, "Hey, no, we need to revise FISA." Its surveilling powers are, of course, what brought up the 2020 election steal, the mass surveillance before that. That was exposed by Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, everybody, that we had this massive problem of them spying on all of us. And so surveillance, a political sabotage, and control of the political system, etc. And then that gets into, again, you get your Maxwells, your Epsteins, who was the protege, of course, the controller being Ghislaine Maxwell of him, that then, these satanic operators of these elitist trillionaire families using these control mechanisms to control the political sphere. So that's, we're at 9 minutes, but that is where we've come to, and everybody's now seeing it as everything's being exposed. And now we have this Iran situation. And so I wanted to just say that it goes back to that time of the creation of this Pilgrim Society, and nobody is allowed to mention their name. Even Carol Quigley in his books, that were kind of okayed by Kissinger, weren't allowed to mention the Pilgrim Society. And the Pilgrims are all who make up our deep state, including the Inn of the Courts with Boasberg, etc., who refuses to let Judge Pirro, the U.S. attorney there in D.C., execute her investigation into Jerome Powell. And we now have, of course, Jerome Powell today. Jerome Powell and, of course, the seemingly 1 billion plus hundreds of millions of overages in the remodel of this little this bastion, this little castle that they were trying to create there in downtown DC. And what did Powell come out and say today? He won't, that interest rates are frozen, will not reduce the interest rates, and citing, of course, the Iran war. And so everyone's hair on fire still about the Iran war. And of course, we have the Joe Kent situation, right? The director of the U.S. Underneath Tulsi Gabbard, who is our stalwart, who is a massive shield here against what the deep state is trying to do against Trump. Basically, we have him as the director for the Contra intelligence. Basically, let me get his exact title here, but it basically is that he is the CIA front for what should have been the National Counterterrorism Task Force director. And he resigns yesterday, and everybody's hair on fire. I agree with Joe Kent. I agree with him. Israel, it's all about Israel. Israel's in control. And on this channel, as you know, Israel has tons of control. And that is massive, and it's a huge ongoing thing. But I continue to believe in the what is moving forward in a very executed, step-by-step situation here. In this remaking of the Middle East. And we can know because we go back to in last November in the national security documents, the national security and defense strategy that was rolled out by Hegseth, but also the whole Pentagon, was that when it comes to the Middle East, first of all, they said, we are refocusing on the Western Hemisphere. We are going with an approach of that the Western Hemisphere is what matters to the USA. We are going to basically redirect our assets, our military assets to defend the hemisphere, but also clean up the hemisphere. Hence, you have the Shield of America, right? The Shield of the Americas, and this gets into Ecuador, Paraguay, multiple nations in the Southern Hemisphere, where you have now Kristi Noem has been redirected to be part of that, which is interesting. We'll get into Mark Wayne Mullen, who's facing huge opposition there in his confirmation hearings today. But basically what this was, that was outside of the Western Hemisphere when it came to the strategy back last November, was they announced that in the Middle East, we will no longer be responding and acting as if we have a terrorism infrastructure threat, and that's not how CENTCOM will work. It's not how PACCOM is going to work. We're looking at instead building what would be the economic partnership with the Middle East to build energy infrastructure, to have positive economic trade, that we want sovereign nations, that we want peace through economic sovereign nation bilateral agreement gains. And this is still what's going on, but we have this Iran situation that people are failing to understand, I believe, that thinking there's going to be this endless war in the Middle East, and it's not what's happening. And Israel's still a wild card. Israel's still the situation that we, continue to try to dissect, where they're, Israel first, the whole, desert to the sea, whatever that is. But the whole situation now with Lebanon, their relentless and ongoing situation. And so we're going to keep addressing that, but it's important to understand that that we have Trump coming out very clearly, and I'm going to, um, I'm about to jump into the Joe Kent situation and his resignation and him blaming Israel and that Trump, there's like a coup in the Trump administration controlled by Israel. We have Carolyn Levitt coming out over and over and saying that's ridiculous, that to consider that Trump is controlled by anybody. Trump is not. He's absolutely the one in control. That's an aside. But let's just look at one thing that Trump did say when he first heard, he didn't first hear about it, but he was sitting with the Prime Minister of Ireland yesterday on St. Patrick's Day, and may the snakes of Ireland be removed once again, okay? Because we need some leaders in Ireland to rise up. That snake of a prime minister that they have, who was in the White House yesterday, and Trump kind of made fun of him, referring to the bust of Winston Churchill. That's not great because we want to we want to see Ireland absolutely free from this EU regime, but they are puppets in this, and one of the most hard hit by the replacement migration, the UN Bank Street elite situation of taking over the countries, the north and south of Ireland. And so, but what Trump said when he was met with the, hey, did you hear about Joe Kent's resignation? We have basically Trump saying, well, it's really interesting. I'm sure you all heard that he said, oh, he was never good on security and very weak on security. I think he's a good man. And what you hear is this emotional from MAGA, from wherever, all of these people saying, "Oh, he lost his wife in the, in these Middle East wars, father of two children," all of these heartstring things, right? As if these people who sign up to defend the country. It's very interesting to watch this ongoing situation on the MAGA side of this constant tiny violin playing about the warriors that are sent out to defend the country, and the situation here of actually this operation to remove the stranglehold of globalism over the USA, which is massive, and what Trump is trying to deconstruct and doing it layer by layer. And we're going to continue to talk about it. But what Trump did say was that because of the Iran conflict, and Joe Kent had said, I'm resigning because there's no evidence to show that Iran was an imminent threat, right? But what did Trump say? Hey, remember when Barack Obama? This is so interesting that Trump said this in this meeting with the Prime Minister of Ireland. He said, remember when Barack Obama emptied all the banks? He said there were banks, all the banks of D.C., all the banks of the bordering state of Maryland and Virginia. All the banks were emptied of all their cash, and this is very interesting because that's not something you hear often. They were emptied of all their cash. They removed the seats from the planes of two 747s. They loaded it all up with cash in the billions and brought it and delivered it to Iran. Okay, remember it was Barack Obama that also gave to Iran the drone on a half shell. Basically, here, go ahead, and then now they have the Shahed drones. They've created all this military might that on the MAGA side, you keep hearing people say, "Oh, it's just amazing. These Iranians, the Persians are so amazing." Delivered technology that they then adopted. And so Trump saying that that Obama delivered these billions of dollars to the IRGC. And what do we hear? We hear over the weekend, we're seeing that massive strikes directly on the IRGC individuals. Okay, they're trying to go for the oligarchs, and we have an Israel problem with possibly assassinating. It's just this is the dynamic in the game. The assassinations, as Israel's want to do, Mossad, whatever you want to call them. I don't just blanket Israel, but the people that are in charge of these operations continually, obviously, They want what they want, and they continue to assassinate, whether it is in Ukraine or all of these different situations where our negotiators get blown up, right? And that's not good. But this is good. So the blowing up of individual IRGC oligarchs and officials, and the Basij, who are basically the internal police under the IRGC that go after all the citizens of Iran who have been protesting, who are the ones who have been doing the killing of, people say it's actually up to more like 50,000 people who were protesting the droughts, the destruction of the farmlands. Iran grows about 80%, of its food internally there in the country. And so the IRGC, as oligarchs, have been hobbling really their own country. And what has brought them to here is because they have dammed off the water, and they don't do desalination like they do in so many other Middle East countries. They mostly do water internally in Iran. And so they've been stealing all the water and actually contributing, salting the land of these traditional farmlands in all these debacles of really shoddy dams and things they've created. And that's where you got these massive protests of drought and famine. And so basically what's been happening is you have the RGC being blown up, and you see the Basij police also being blown up directly. And this has to do with checkpoints and vehicles. And apparently, there's been a lot of internal information coming out to describe when these checkpoints are happening, where they're controlling citizens. And of course, we know, yes, of course, there's Israeli Mossad information involved there, but it looks like there's also a lot of internal Iranians involved in this as well. And we won't, dig too deep in there, but it's very interesting to hear that and what Trump had to say in response to the situation of the Joe Kent's resignation. And I would say it's not so much a resignation as a forced exit. And let's get into that now for a second. What we have here with Joe Kent, we're going to get into so much besides. I still have to get to the elections, some major reveals about election fraud. Delcy Gabbard before the Senate Intelligence Committee today, and Ratcliffe doing great jobs to thwart their attempts to try to, capture them in these loops of barrages of questions that were trying to lead the American people into believing Trump, went against intelligence in Iran, etc. They didn't pull it off. But let's get into Joe Kent here for a second in this resignation. He says, basically, there was no intelligence that Iran is an imminent threat, and Trump's administration is captured by the Israelis. And there's like a coup on the U.S. by the Israelis, and we're all on this channel, as massive problems with the Mossad hanging out in our Pentagon, and all of this Israel stuff. It's going to keep going. Believe me, there's going to be more, and there will be lots coming down to do with Israel. I guarantee it. But we get with Joe Kent the situation of his involvement in the CIA. Okay, let's just say it directly. And it does seem like Ratcliffe is slowly turning the tide in the CIA. I'm always like, I'm always like very skeptical. There does seem to be a turn of the tide here, but I believe it was intelligence out of the CIA that led to probably the pressuring of Joe Kent to get out of Dodge and to get out of the way. And his role as the National Counterterrorism Task Force Director was already dodgy, because we already know there's tens. I mean, it's funny that Kristi Noem gets ousted and is gone when she admits under oath that we have tens of thousands of Islamists that came over the border that we don't know where they are. We don't know. and neither does Joe Kent, apparently. But he has been very involved in the CIA and multiple operations when he was in the military to do with Syria. And this has to do with, of course, bringing arms to ISIS and everything connected with that. And so it's very interesting. There's connections here being made by George Webb, and I've linked below his Substack on this. And I would say support him in his investigations. He seems to make really great connections, as I've talked about for years. But he's talking about Joe Kent's involvement, yes, with the CIA, but also getting into assassination plots to do with high-level Pentagon officials. And this is for entertainment purposes only on this channel, right? But we get this George Webb narrative where he basically is saying, this Fort Huachuca situation and communications between Joe Kent and what's his face, Mitch Snow, right? You're like, what? Candace Owens, and she's this Mitch Snow person who seemed to be planted into her intelligence gathering that she was doing under the C. Kirk murder situation investigation. And basically Mitch Snow as like, I was at Fort Huachuca and I saw all this stuff and et cetera, et cetera. And so George Webb has been on that trail for months now. And he's come into intelligence where he is saying that actually Joe Kent was in communications with Mitch Snow. And this all leads back to Fort Huachuca, right? And we know Fort Huachuca down there in Arizona was very connected with underground tunnels to do with drug trafficking. They call it the Danny Rothschild's, drug trafficking tunnel, and all of this, right? But supposedly there was to be a huge high-level meetup there of Pentagon officials at Fort Huachuca on 9/9 of last year. So this is all very interesting, what George Webb is having to say. But what he's saying is that Joe Kent has been in communication with Mitch Snow. And this had to do with attempted assassination attempts on high Pentagon officials, including possibly there being their Secretary of War Hegseth and his undersecretary. And so this is, Hansel. Very, very interesting. I'll link it below. I'm not going to dig too deep into that rabbit hole without knowing too much more. But there is this this beneath the surface sub rosa situation of Joe Kent with deep CIA operations and the knowledge because of having his level of national security clearance, knowing the travel plans of so many Pentagon officials as he would do, and being interconnected in what was a larger situation. And the Charlie Kirk situation is as large as it can get. However, perhaps there's a larger picture here. Perhaps we still don't know fully what's going on with Charlie Kirk, and we don't know, entirely what went on. I mean, talking to the choir here, because I still, at this point, very much believe that, obviously TPUSA has been captured. It is a dodgy situation, but very interesting to look at this when we see things like special air missions being delineated in the intelligence that Joe Kent would have had access to, and what George Webb is saying is that he connects the dots here in of the Iranian supposed plot. People like Ardestani and Farahani, who are both came out of Venezuela with diplomatic passports, right? Venezuela, and we're going to be touching into the election stuff with Venezuela in a moment. And what Patrick Byrne came out and talked about today, which is mind-blowing and massive, and that leads into Delcy Gabbard and her just holding the line with the Senate Intelligence Committee today. But basically, Ardestani and Farhani, two Iranian assassins who did come through Venezuela, and that's what we've been hearing for months and years now, but at least months and months, that many Islamists, assassins have come across the border through Venezuelan passports. And basically that these two, who were both meant to be assassins, not only on high Pentagon officials, but against Trump, are interconnected somehow in George Webb's investigations with Joe Kent having access to communications involving this. So, there is also the underground background here of Joe Kent's CIA involvement in the arming of ISIS in Syria and this sort of thing. So it looks like a get out of Dodge moment for Kent, and we will see what's going on, because what Trump did then in the day after Joe Kent's uh, resignation is he put up these screenshots of Joe Kent's urging Trump to go into Iran to take out their infrastructure, take out their nuclear infrastructure, and basically to defend his military brothers and soldiers and sisters in Iraq, that they were imminent threat to Iraq. And it's all very, very interesting because, of course, back in the day, way back, if we go back in the history, we had the U.S. arming, of course, Iran, Iraq, and um, Saddam Hussein, right? We had the U.S. The CIA cutout that was Saddam Hussein in September 22nd of 1980, invading Iran from Iraq, right, in this massive 8-year war that killed hundreds of thousands of Iranians in this proxy war out of the city of London. Let's not forget where it's all coming from, out of the city of London, to go against Iran and the Shiites at that time, who, of course, overthrew the Shah in '79. And of course, then we had the end of the Red-Green Alliance. And this is what people need to understand in history, is that Red-Green Alliance, which is the communism and the Islamism, ends once once the Islam takes over and the communists are killed and destroyed and thrown out, right? And that's happy time for the banksters of London as well, and Cartel Babylon and the Rothschild empires and the puppet masters controlling this whole thing, ultimately to get to this one world government, which is what they only care about, and they love as much death and mayhem, and as we know from the Epstein files, satanic evil in the economy of sin that for them brings them massive satanic power and demonic power. That is what elevates their power and ability, and why they keep revealing their method to us. So anyway, so as we go forward, we look at this with um, the situation of Joe Kent, and Trump posted these screenshots way back to January of 2020, right, where Joe Kent is saying, wipe out Iran's ballistic missile capability. And then on April 20th, 2024, he's saying Iran is poised to attack. Um, Trump is leaving Iraq, DC is leaving Iraq troops vulnerable, and going on, really through the fall of last year, right around this Fort Huachuca time. So very interesting stuff there. And then we get Joe Kent appearing on the Sean Ryan show, which is, a lot of people understand that to be like a CIA front show. And so this, undermining of the Iran operation that Trump is doing to stop the city of London's control of energy through the Rothschild Empire and their minions of the world. Okay, if you look at the DOE, Department of Energy, this changeover, before it used to be Rothschilds owned everything on our grid, in our energy, etc. This is the dismantling of it. And so we're looking at it, and we're going to keep watching what happens. And so it was very interesting to watch Delcy Gabbard today. Well, let's continue with this. So before we jump into Gabbard and elections and everything, but we did see Gabbard and Ratcliffe and Patel before the Senate Intelligence Committee, supposedly not just on Iran, but on all intelligence briefings. They kept trying to capture them and saying, did you tell Trump, did you give him briefings on Iran, and what did it say, and all of this? And Gabbard was very staid, and Ratcliffe as well, that yes, there was threats from Iran, and it was valid, and but no, we're not going to tell you what those briefings were, right? And so as we look at this, and Promethean Updates did a great do on this yesterday, where, just to remind people that in Trump's State of the Union, he said the first duty of the American president is to protect U.S. citizens. But this is what's important to understand here is protect U.S. citizens from cartel Babylon, the bankster elite. And he had said, not from, illegal aliens. That's not our job, obviously, because of their plan of the replacement migration, the Islamist invasion, all of this, the cartels, the gang bangers, the evil of mass destruction in the USA, the drugs, etc. And what Trump had said was that what he came out and said yesterday was, this was a NATO test. And what do you hear? Oh, mainstream media, the Daily Mail, CNN, all of them. Trump said before he asked for their help, and now he said, oh, we don't need their help. No, we don't need their help. And the test was, here we are about to take down Iran, which that the city of London runs and occupies and controls the Straits of Hormuz, and we need this to be done and over. But yet, you're not behind it. You're not here for the USA. And what Trump said is, we have spent trillions on the NATO nations in defending them since the Second World War. And it is very interesting that this could very likely be the end, finally, of the USA leaving NATO, which would be fantastic, which I am 100% for. And so this is what's gone down, and for people to understand it and get a just get a handle on the fact that Trump is exposing NATO, and of course Merz, Germany's the worst. That they that they're just liars and thieves. The city of London has constantly gone on, and what was the Pilgrim Society method. It was always thievery and extraction, and diversion. That they would create these boogeymen, they would steal all the resources, and they would create diversions about why it's happening, whether it's terrorism or this or that, or multiple conflicts. And Trump is saying, no, we're that's over. We're creating peace through prosperity, and whatever's in that way, especially when it comes to our international shipping, we're not going to allow that continue anymore. We're not going to pay this, Barbary tribute, okay, to the city of London through the proxy of Iran, under the threat of risk insurance of terrorism. And so this is very important to understand. And in February of last year, over a year ago, this was the Munich Security Council then. You had J.D. Vance go there, and he said very clearly, as vice president, he said, Europe is being destroyed from within. Our threat is that you all won't actually defend yourselves or the West. You're doing the opposite. You're destroying your country from within, from, of course, replacement migration, Muslim invasion, being invited in, and also that you are destroying your energy, you are destroying your infrastructure, and your people are suffering. And then on top of it, you are rigging your elections, and referencing the election in Romania, of course, with um, Georgescu, right, and the stealing of his election and the threat of imprisonment to him. And so this is all very important to understand, that this is the ongoing rollout of this incredible strategy on this grand chess game of the American Revolution being completed and being taken back from the City of London. And so let's get into something that Patrick Byrne had to say, and then I'll move into Delcy Gabbard some as well. But what we had here from um, what we had from uh, Patrick Byrne, which is really important and great stuff coming out of him today, was he let the cat out of the bag around a couple things, and part of it was to do with exposing the cabal behind Israel, largely the Ehud Barak faction that gets into your our CIA, everything Epstein, everything cabal. All run out of the City of London ultimately, but the City of London just represents the Bank Street elites, the trillionaires in control, right? The Rodnite economy of sin, whatever you want to call it. Rothschild's very, very central in their money and power. But basically, that was, that all of, when we look at October 7th, for instance, Ehud Barak and it was Gina Haspel, right, who the former CIA director, they owned huge stocks in the company. Um, uh, I don't have it in my mind at the moment. I've talked about it many, many, many times on my videos. But basically, the security company that ran all of the sort of security wall, or the surveillance wall, that allowed all of the stand down of what happened with the October 7th events, that was Ehud Barak, Gina Haspel, and their security cyber infrastructure that they had shut down to let all of this happen. And so it's all a very interesting mix also of what's going on amongst the Israeli faction. It's not a one oil at all. This is multiple factions also going on there, and people need to understand it, that this is very important. But what I think is very important to understand here, although one thing that Patrick Byrne did mention today, and of course, Patrick Byrne, whistleblower, he's involved in the CIA himself, but huge disruptor when it came to the 2020 elections to prove the stealing of the elections, the machines. He has single-handedly brought in Venezuelan whistleblowers to do with DOM, INION, Smartmatic, Chavez, the operations of the Venezuelan mafia, how this was all created. And I'll get into that in a second. And he's been tirelessly spending his own treasure and fortune, and also his health has massively suffered from something that looks like a type of Havana syndrome situation that's been hitting him for years. But basically, he said one of the ways that this Ehud Barak operation went down, super interconnected with the Clintons, but then also came in with Obama, Muslim Brotherhood, but hugely connected with the Clintons, and of course, Mark Rich. They're one of their primary operators to do with the Clinton Global Initiative and Epstein's funding of it. All of this came out of what was Barack Associates, this LLC out of Delaware, right? We keep hearing about these Delaware LLCs. And of course, that has so much to do with how they were able to clamp their control over Biden. But let's get into something else that came out so important from Patrick Byrne today, which is that he said that there was this lawyer, Tom Carroll, out of Pennsylvania, where there is a grand jury paneled, where they are dealing with election steal situation of 2020 and 2022. And this will play into Gabbard in a moment, who was asked and grilled by Senator Warner, grilling her over and over. Do you have evidence of foreign election threats for 2026 elections? Do you, do you, do you? And this was, of course, right as on the Senate floor, you have this ongoing all day talk about the Save America Act, right? And this is going on and on. and they want a reason to somehow hobble this situation. But Gabbard very much was able to deflect from that, saying basically. Saying, I'm not telling you what the hell is going on in 2026 elections because we got tons of stuff about to come out. We already know. You've seen like John Solomon and justthenews.com, etc., talking about, they already know the Chinese, the involvement, the Serbians, all of this. But what came out from Tom Carroll out of this, a lawyer out of this grand jury panel in Pennsylvania, is you have Eric Coomer, remember? Our elections are the most secure ever. This guy who was actually working deeply with DOMINON, who said, the most secure elections ever, and he has all kinds of strange things that happened after that election with him driving his truck into a house, just crazy stuff with his behavior. But basically, this lawyer Tom Carroll said the Department of War has to get involved immediately with what's coming out from this grand jury. And basically, what he said was that Eric Coomer gave very poignant and explosive evidence that what he had testified back to in 2022, that the tabulator machines and the handheld devices are offline. There's no way you can access them. Blah 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 blah. It turns out he was working so deeply as like a CTO of DOMINON that he lied his face off, for one thing. But what he came out and said in this recent testimony was absolutely the opposite of that, and they have him in massive perjury. But also, more important to us, the admission that yes, the servers are accessed, and that he himself, for entertainment purposes only, was able to access servers in the precincts from a remote computer. And so this is massive. It is huge, and a remote desktop computer. And we know this is also happening out of Serbia, accessing code and all the machines in the precincts. So this is where we're at. The China thing is huge with the bringing in of all the ballots, the delivery of the ballots, but also the creating of the machines with the software out of DOMINON, out of Venezuela. Also being the, supplying the software created and then shipped through the beard of Taiwan to the USA, just reboxed and sent over for this steal. Okay, and this happened in 2022 as well. We lost, over a dozen seats in the House, possibly 6 Senate seats because of this in the 2022. That's just 2022. And who Patrick Byrne specifically named was a man named Ronald Morales. And this is all coming out too. Remember, we have Maduro in prison, right? In prison there, supposedly still, but I doubt it. New York City Met prison, alongside the other general who was also imprisoned, who basically was the bag man for election steal operations for years and decades. And so we get this whole situation of Ronald Morales kind of being the kind of kingpin here of the Venezuelan mafia, to do with election steal, like the head of the election steal software guy out of Smartmatic, and then DOMINON. And Smartmatic is still in this DOJ fraud investigation that's still active right now. And so basically, Ronald Morales was sent to the USA in 2006 by Chavez. And this also came out in this testimony, this grand jury in Pennsylvania. So we know that DNI Gabbard has all the evidence, okay? We know that Harmeet Dillon is doing her level best as the civil rights assistant AG to get the voter rolls cleaned up, to sue all those states. She has 16 states of red states that gave over their voter rolls. We have all of these states that won't do it, including multiple red states. This is a uniparty situation where they are going after, um, uh, securing the elections. And so the Save America Act is potent and important, but what doesn't it have in it? No machines, no machines. We are one of the only countries in the world still allowing these machines in a civilized Western civilization, republic or country or democracy. And so the machines aren't in the act, okay? And this is what is so disturbing and awful. But what Patrick Byrne also had to say was that you also have in this mix, okay, Ballard Associates, okay, Ballard Associates, the oil companies of Citgo and Chevron out of Venezuela. These sort of the top dogs in those situations, right? We know Israel, huge there, and the Ballard Associates, and of course Susie Wiles and Pam Bondi, sew up in there a little bit Rubio as well of this Ballard Associates problem in our administration and their roles and connections to the machines and the 2020 steal, 2022 steal. So this is all what's going to be happening and coming out. And so we're going to keep looking at it. And so I'll just say with Gabbard, she is a stalwart holding the line in the ground, okay? Holding ground basically against what is the threat of when we look at these Democrats and uniparty people in our Senate Intelligence Committee, for instance, basically, assaulting her with, tell us, what'd you tell Trump about Iran? Is there election threat? All of this, trying to catch out lies, trying to find a way to impeach, attack, assault in any way the administration. This all has to do with the 2026 election, obviously, massively. But it also has to do with the fact that they really want to know what's going on because they know that it's being uncovered massively and their own culpability in it. It will be revealed. Okay, these major players in our Senate and our House, and so it's really huge. Especially when we see, let's just pass FISA right through again. That's Thune and Johnson. This is what we're looking at. Okay, and so I was going to get into Mark Wayne Mullins and everything there, but I'll do that tomorrow. It's already at 52 minutes plus. So we're going to leave it there for now, but I think that's a lot of information. People need to understand the war is on, and this operation in Iran is part of the larger war. This is about the USA reclaiming independence from the City of London and the Bank Street elite that makes up the World Economic Forum demons. It's everyone who wants a one world government to destroy America and extract all our wealth and resources, and has been doing post World War II on steroids, but way, way back before that, with the robber barons already lined up and looking for their lordships and their dukedoms and wanting to be part of this Atlanticist elite. But we are ending it. Trump is ending it. And it's not easy. It requires some sacrifice. But that's why prayer and knowing what we can do in our own lives and in our own abilities to generate our own wellness and sacrifice looks way easier for us than it does for most of the world, even though I know it's so hard and I know how much it takes to take on being part of American Revolution 2.0. So I salute you and congratulate you for being willing to do the fight, because this is our only shot, and it is actually an incredible and ingenious plan. So let's stick with it. Let's pray hugely, okay, for the success of the American Revolution 2.0, for the Trump team getting rid of any traitors, infiltrators, and continuing to squirrel out going forward the proper steps, the plan, these chessboard pieces, because believe me, it's happening. Okay, and we'll continue to cover as much of it as I can. So I'm going to end there, and I thank you so much for watching. if you found something valuable or helpful, added value, I guess they say, in this video, and you want to support You Are Free TV, there are ways to do so below, and I so appreciate anyone who joins up to support monthly or just to keep the channel going. It is a shoestring budget here and massively shadow banned. After my deplatforming years ago, it's just shadow banned wherever I go. So I appreciate you liking, subscribing, sharing, really making that extra bit of effort. That's a tiny bit of effort here in this information war that we are conducting and happy to be part of. And I will also mention my fantastic sponsor, c60evo.com/YAFTV. This is the incredible ESS60 molecule that is the kind of the king of carbon-60 out there, only because it is the same product that was used in the Nobel Prize winning studies. It's made in the best lab in the world for creating the purest carbon-60, known as ESS60, because it is so pure, 99.99999% pure, no solvents, etc. And what it does is it cleans out your mitochondria, which means that you have cellular health. It means that all of the what they call the anti-aging or longevity stuff, that all comes from having healthy cells and your mitochondria being cleaned of all the garbage and the assaults we're going through, whether it is what's raining down on us from the skies, the jabs, the turbo, everything that's come after the biowarfare of 2019 and forward. This central nervous system, the big C, all of it, people buying it up by the caseload, but it also just gives you incredible energy, clarity, focus. It gets into your neurons, crosses the blood-brain barrier, cleans out your neurons. It's an amazing, amazing product. And so I recommend it hugely. It also provides better sleep. It just really is an all-in-one oil, truly. And so check it out. You are free, c60evo.com/YAFTV. Use the code YAFTV for 10% off. And anybody who donates to the channel automatically gets sent a code and link for 15% off. So it's a fantastic deal. Check it out below. Great, great product. And I so appreciate them as my sponsor. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. You are free. We keep up the fight, and we also keep up massively the prayers, right? The prayers, because the Prince of Peace is in our corner, and allow that with your prayer to let in that guidance and message about what is the best use of your time, your treasure, your energies, for how we continue to free not only America, but really sovereign nations across the world from cartel Babylon, the economy of sin, and the satanic attachments and demonic forces that want to take us down and take us over. So you are free. I'll see you tomorrow.